Welcome to the Drop the Mic Wrestling Podcast on Tobacco Road Sports Radio and TobaccoRoadSportsRadio.com as part of your Wrestling Wednesday card. I'm your host, Michael Davis. The Elimination Chamber is this weekend, and we have a big preview in store for you. It's not quite March yet. We're still on the road to WrestleMania, but we have some madness on the show for Drop the Mic this week. He doesn't get to talk about wrestling a lot, but we give him the opportunity this week. Without further ado, he was on the show a few weeks ago from everything college basketball. We have Josh Burton here with us. Josh, welcome. I see you put on the Cincinnati Reds hat for today. I see you got the Kentucky hat right behind you. What made you decide to put a Cincinnati hat on instead of Kentucky?
Well, I mean, I wore this all day, if I'm being completely honest here. And I mean, the Reds, we've talked about this. The Reds are my team. So got to rep out for the Reds. I'll have my Kentucky stuff on tomorrow, which will be a Wednesday, February 21st. Kentucky plays. I'm one of those people who likes to dress up on game day. So yeah, I'll have the Kentucky stuff on tomorrow. Also behind me, I don't know if you can see, I've got Chris Jericho's book, his second book, not the Lionheart, the first one, the second of what 4 he did. So, dude, I'm ready to go. I think I mentioned it last time I was on, the first time I was on. Been a huge wrestling fan since the time I was 2 years old. WB is so fun right now, and I can't wait to talk about this.
Dude, and I was just getting lunch with a friend, I believe yesterday, and he's not a big wrestling guy, but I was telling him about the podcast and everything. And he's like, dude, that must be so exciting for you. Like everywhere I'm looking, like didn't Raw get like this Netflix deal? And, he's hearing about WrestleMania and the Raw. Dude, wrestling has finally taken over the entire media world. That ESPN and Fox and Netflix are actually investing time and energy into WWE. And honestly, everybody wins at that point.
Well, look at Raw last night, right? As we're recording this on a Tuesday. Look at Raw last night and the crossover with the TKO group and out in Anaheim. Like Michael Chandler, for those who don't watch like MMA or fighting in general, he's one of the best lightweights in the entire world. He was front and center. They gave him mic. They talked about this as a UFC, one of the best lightweights in the world. You had the Netflix crew there front row. They did kind of something special for them. I mean, pro wrestling, specifically WWE that we're talking about tonight, is so hot. Like it's beyond red hot. It is white hot. And if there's a color that's hotter than that, they're getting close to that. Like they're selling up buildings everywhere they go. House shows. They're doing 10,000 people in a house show. Like every building they're going to sold out. The shows are much more fun to watch weekly with the storylines and the action in the ring. And it's such a fun time to be a pro wrestling fan in general, but especially if you're just a WWE fan, you're eating good right now because it is popping here lately. And it's fun, man. We're on the road to WrestleMania. I can't wait to talk about it tonight.
Dude, I'm so glad you brought that up because I mentioned on last week's show that I went to SmackDown a couple weeks when they were in Charlotte. Now, I went to a Monday Night Raw episode back in 2021, 2022. It might have been 22 because of, getting out of the pandemic and stuff. Triple H had just taken over creative. But dude, like most of the Spectrum Center was like tapered off and like everybody makes the AEW hard cam jokes now. That was WWE 2 years ago. And now that Spectrum Center like almost sold out for a SmackDown. And The Rock wasn't there. Roman Reigns wasn't there. It like had like maybe 40 seats available at 8:00 Eastern. Like that is incredible growth for what you could arguably say is already like the number one pro wrestling or sports entertainment company in the entire world.
Well, the crazy thing too, it's not just the fact, because like wrestling, a lot of stuff is very cyclical. I can't say that. You know what I'm trying to say, but it has its ups and downs. Like I was fortunate enough when I was early in my fanhood, like I said, at 2 years old, it was kind of at the tail end of the Hogan era, but I still got to see Hogan and Warrior and Macho Man and all that. Then it went through a little down period. Then I was fortunate enough to live through the Attitude Era. and it kind of went through a little down period. Now I'm fortunate enough to get to live through whatever era this is again. And you see it not only with the crowds and, as you mentioned, the mainstream coverage and the crowds, even like last night again on Raw. They're so invested into it. The majority of these towns they go to, they're following along. If Jey Uso's on the turnbuckle, they're doing yeet before he can even throw his arms up in the air. Or if a guy or girl's cutting a promo, they have a funny or legendary or whatever catchphrase, the crowd's saying it before they can even say along. So the crowd participation, along with them showing up more, the participation is back. And you only do that if you're invested into the product and having a good time. And WWE, like I said, they're eating good, man. And for us fans, we're eating good. They're doing some incredible work right now.
And it's the perfect time to have a wrestling podcast. Josh does his own stuff with everything college basketball. And if you're not following him on social medias right now, like, please go do that. But yeah, man, we get to talk some wrestling because the Elimination Chamber is this weekend. A lot of people in the United States are, kind of like myself, a little upset about the time zone difference that Australia has. But to be fair, Americans, we're so spoiled. We always get like the best pay-per-view times. So this actually event starts at 5 a.m. Eastern, 2 a.m. Pacific time. So we'll cover that card and we'll honestly get your thoughts on the time zone difference. But before we dive in, the Elimination Chamber has a special place in my heart. It's one of the more incredible matches I've been able to experience. I have a favorite moment from the Elimination Chamber, a favorite match. I was wondering if one thing sticks out to you when it comes to the Elimination Chamber.
So yeah, so when you threw me the rundown, I had to double take because it's a fun pay-per-view. Well, historically it has been. And like the Royal Rumble, I can name off a million different moments, and WrestleMania and all this. The Elimination Chamber, I had to stop and think for a little bit. I will say moments outside of the actual wrestling. I remember being a teenager when the first Elimination Chamber was announced and came through, and how excited I was because I was at that age coming out of like the first couple TLCs, and you'd see a steel cage match and all this hardcore stuff. So then you see this big like bird-like cage that kept everybody in with random. It was like a mixture of like a steel cage, Hell in a Cell, and almost like a Royal Rumble with the timed entrances. So it was really cool. And I remember how stoked I was the first time they ever had it in a video game to get to play that.
Yeah.
And if I remember right, it was
SVR. It was the original SmackDown versus Raw, right?
Was it? Because I couldn't remember if it was Here Comes the Pain had it or not first. I was thinking they had it, but if not, it was SmackDown versus Raw on the PlayStation 2. Yes. But I remember, because again, it's like that Crash TV, like you get to play multiple people in the same game, and it's like so much fun. I know I'm ranting, but Elimination Chamber was awesome for that as a teenage me heading into like middle school, high school. Favorite moments. Again, it's a tough one, but I'll just go back to the first one. And Shawn Michaels in the poopy brown pants for some reason he thought was a good idea to wear. Who knows? And he had the bob haircut. Him coming back earlier in that year in 2002 at SummerSlam after being out for almost 4 years, having that incredible match against Triple H. And I've always been a big Shawn Michaels fan. And it's like he never missed a beat. So then he gets back in the full-time fold, and then he's in the Elimination Chamber, and you look at that Elimination Chamber match that had Shawn, Triple H, Rob Van Dam, which was one of my all-time favorites, Booker T, Chris Jericho, which I was a big fan of. All this incredible talent for this one match going for the World Heavyweight Championship, and Shawn super kicks, hits a Sweet Chin music on Triple H for the win in those poopy brown pants with the bob haircut that looked nothing like the Heartbreak Kid. That was cool. Also in the same match, RVD tried to commit murder on Triple H by doing that 5-star frog splash where he couldn't even stand the full extension. He had to like grab onto the top of the ceiling and just said, screw it. And his knee came down across Triple H's throat. I'll go with the first one. The first one's always symbolic and special. So the first one in 2002, plus Saliva played Chris Jericho to the ring they were at WWF New York playing as Jericho was walking to the ring, playing King of My World. A lot of good memories. I'll go with the first one. Shawn Michaels winning that very first one.
Wow. Dude, there is so many like callbacks you just had there. First of
Yeah,
all,
no,
like
man.
Chris Jericho and his themes have been pretty on point. Like King of My World. Then of course now he has Judas. And then, mentioning Rob Van Dam and Triple H, that spot that went bad. Dude, just a couple weeks ago, Commander had that same similar spot. I think it was a Phoenix splash on Wardlow where he like came down on Wardlow's throat during that match. I think that was the same episode that Rob Van Dam main evented against Swerve Strickland. Like,
that's crazy. And that's got to be a scary thing. Like I've heard like I think it was podcasts or WWE network videos, like RVD's side of like point of view from it. Like, oh man, I just hit him. I feel bad. And then Triple H's point of view, I've heard him talk about it. Be like, I could not catch my breath. That's got to be a scary feeling. Like you just got a knee to your throat from what, 20 feet up in the air, 15 feet up in the air. And then you're like laying in the middle of the ring in Madison Square Garden. You're like, I can't breathe. That's got to be scary, right? I mean, that's got to be terrifying.
And not to even mention, it's the Elimination Chamber. You mentioned it's like that ultimate like crash course. Everyone's going at it. And you mentioned like Shawn Michaels winning because it was the first. Well, I remember the first time I got to watch an Elimination Chamber match live. I wasn't there in the arena, unfortunately, but my parents ordered New Year's Revolution in 2006 and got to see the first WWE Championship title defense for John Cena inside Elimination Chamber. And if you remember, Cena wins because he rolled up Carlito, and that's all the strength he could muster until Vince McMahon came out, said the night was not over. Edge was cashing in his Money in the Bank briefcase they won at WrestleMania 21, which was also ironically the first WrestleMania I got to watch on TV. And Edge comes down, cashes in on John Cena. So those were like two monumental moments and memories for me as a kid, as a wrestling fan. And now I have a wrestling podcast where we get to talk about this weekend's Elimination Chamber, hopefully bringing people the same amount of memories. But dude, I don't know. You're in the Eastern time zone, aren't you?
Yeah, man. And full disclosure, that's on Saturday. We got a lot, like another loaded slate of college basketball. I'm more than likely not going to get up to watch it. I will catch it when I wake up a few hours later. If it was WrestleMania or something, yeah, I'd be up at 5 a.m. to watch it. I'll probably sleep in and then catch the full replay shortly after.
Yeah,
to be completely honest.
Dude, I don't blame you. I said on last week's show, like, hey, and this is a reminder, okay, guys? I have this phone. Yeah, you can see me and my uncle on there in Duke shirts. He's a UNC fan, actually. But if you text me spoilers for the Elimination Chamber within 24 hours of that event, you are getting blocked. You are getting unfriended. You will not hear from me ever, ever again. Okay?
Ever.
Oh, that was a better
That's
Chris
funny.
Jericho impression. But dude, yeah, like
No,
5
yours
a.m.
was good. Yours was good.
5 a.m. is way too early. I get it. Like other people in other countries like have to deal with this on a consistent monthly basis.
Mm-hmm.
But dude, 5 a.m. is way too early. And Peacock doesn't make it easier because Peacock like doesn't allow you to like start from the beginning until the actual event's entirely concluded. Like I feel like that hurts WWE's chances at potential ratings, potential viewership that's been at all-time highs over the last couple years.
Yeah, I do too. I think people are going to go back and watch regardless. But as we're about to get into the match card itself, I think it's going to hurt. I think basically what I'm trying to say is that people will maybe go back and watch the Elimination Chamber matches or maybe some highlights that they've heard about after the show is over with. But I don't think it's a card people are really going to want to like, hey, I've got to be up at 5 a.m. to watch unless they're getting paid to watch it for other content or something else. We'll talk about the card, I'm sure, in just a second. But if The Rock was on here and Roman was defending and all the big stars were going to Australia, I think you'd see far more people in the Eastern time zone get up at 5 a.m. But without that, I think you're going to see a lot of people like me and you or whoever say, well, we're not going to get up that early. We'll catch it later that day.
Yeah, and it's not a bad option for those who are, in this American time zone, which I believe a lot of our viewership is. We do have some UK people who watch us on the Tobacco Road Sports
Shout out
Radio YouTube
Europe.
channel. Appreciate you guys. You can keep up with us on all our social media channels. But you mentioned like if The Rock was there or if Cody was wrestling. They do have a Grayson Waller effect on the show with special guests Seth Rollins and Cody Rhodes. So I think they put that on there to kind of like, hey, Rollins and Cody are going to be there. Grayson Waller is going to, host them or whatever. Is Australia. Is there any speculation in your mind that The Rock and Roman Reigns might show up and crash the Grayson Waller effect? Or do you think they would actually announce that they were going to be there in hopes of like people actually tuning in?
Well, since it's not an actual match, I don't think you have to announce it per se. And I think the only reason you announce it is if you're trying to sell the remaining tickets that haven't been sold yet. I do think, because again, it's wrestling, so the old saying, never say never. I do think there is a possibility, and I would even put it as high as maybe like 30% that The Rock, Roman, or both of them show up and do something, because I don't think it's just going to be Waller has a talk show, Cody and Seth get antagonized a little bit, talk a little crap back, and that's kind of the end of it. They've promoted this. There's going to be something more to this setup, that eventual tag match. I think we're all understand that we're headed towards, where it's Rollins and Rhodes versus The Rock and Roman, probably at WrestleMania, I would assume at this point, or at least one of the nights. I wouldn't be surprised. Maybe it's not The Rock and Hey, maybe it's not Rock and Roman. Maybe it's Heyman. But you got to think there's some bloodline involvement in this to kind of further the story along. I don't think it's just Grayson Waller hosting the show with Rhodes and Rollins. That wouldn't be, I mean, you could do that on an episode of Raw or SmackDown.
Yeah, dude, I think it's kind of a hot take. I've heard it on social media too. So I know there's like people who agree with you, but having Rock and Roman versus Rollins and Rhodes at WrestleMania, I don't think personally that's a logical way of putting the WrestleMania card together. And for one reason, yes, I think it'd be awesome if Roman wrestled both nights. I think The Rock should wrestle, but especially when you talk about Seth Rollins and his knee injury that they're nursing right now, I really feel like you got to protect Seth Rollins, because he's going to have to defend his world heavyweight title against whoever wins this Elimination Chamber match that we'll talk about here in a couple seconds. But like, are you really going to put Seth Rollins out there in 2 different matches, back-to-back nights, to risk even further injury to whatever is going on with his knee?
Well, what you could even say that too, there's a risk not only with Rollins, but Roman and Cody, who would the next night, presumably on night 2, be in the main event. There's always a risk one of those two get hurt, and now you're left screwed for the next night, the actual main event of WrestleMania. So there's always that risk, but at least in a tag match, Rollins could be protected somewhat. He doesn't have to work the full match. He could be protected, tags in and out, sell a lot. So, I mean, I think that's where we're headed, whether it's the right call or not. I mean, it is what it is. We'll just sit back and enjoy it. But, yeah, I don't know. I think at least with a tag match, you can protect him somewhat more than what you would a full-on singles match.
Yeah, and you mentioned a tag team match. We'll talk about the Elimination Chamber matches and who we think will win those and go on to WrestleMania to challenge Rhea Ripley, to challenge, or maybe challenge Nia Jax, or challenge Seth Rollins. But you mentioned tag team matches. One of the tag team matches we have is Judgment Day versus Tyler Bate, and now we can call him Pete Dunne. Pete Dunne is officially back. Saw them defeat DIY, or as R-Truth calls them, DX. Tommaso Ciampa and Johnny Gargano. Can we just take a moment and appreciate R-Truth's like greatness right there?
We were talking about the crowds being involved. Well, look how hot they are for R-Truth. Like, the dude did a hot tag in the middle of the Royal Rumble and the crowd came unglued. Like, everything is turning to gold in WWE and R-Truth. I mean, the comedy shtick used to get old, and I think overdone, it still is old, and it's kind of like, but it's working right now, so it's good stuff. It's good stuff. And R-Truth, man, nobody could do it like he can, so props to him.
Dude, at 55 years old, too. 55. Dude is 55.
Crazy. Hitting splits. Hitting the splits at 55.
Dude, I can't hit the splits at 5'25". Doubt I'll be able to in 10 years at 35.
No, I'd be on the injured reserve list for a long time.
Yeah. Now, big question is, like, who wins this tag team match? Does Judgment Day actually drop the belts before WrestleMania? Because I feel like we kind of talked about this on your last appearance on Drop the Mic, where you kind of saw the tag team titles going. Judgment Day doesn't drop these belts this Saturday, right?
I wouldn't think so. But here's the problem. They're doing a nice job slowly rebuilding the tag division. Like, there's some good teams starting to get some shine a little bit. But if you're saving it for WrestleMania for them to drop, who's like the main contenders they're going to drop it to? R-Truth and The Miz? I guess that would be the only case at this point. Awesome Truth. But, I mean, you have the Creed brothers. We haven't seen them in a couple weeks. DIY starting to get some shine. I would like to see them drop them now, and you could still have the Judgment Day versus Awesome Truth in some type of match, like faction match or whatever, because I think they're trying to build Pete Dunne and Tyler Bate right now. Give them the win. Give them the belts, but I'm with you. I think they'll probably hold on to them.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of what Pete Dunne and Tyler Bate, what they're doing. I still remember their match for the UK Championship back several years ago. Tyler Bate, as young as he is, and honestly, he's kind of like my stature, same height, same weight. He is an inspiration, honestly, of just like how quickly he picked up everything. But yeah, dude, I really see it coming down to R-Truth and The Miz winning these tag titles at WrestleMania. They'll probably drop it a night or two later, or R-Truth will like just somehow show up on SmackDown to defend the tag titles and lose them to a SmackDown team, and that's how you split them. Like, you could do so much with that. But yeah, expecting Judgment Day to win. Damian Priest and Finn Balor aren't the only Judgment Day members wrestling this Saturday. Rhea Ripley in her home country of Australia is defending the title against Nia Jax. I explained, I believe, on last week's show, or maybe even 2 weeks ago, that this was perfect. Nia Jax is hated, and Rhea Ripley is supposed to be a heel. So you got to put Rhea Ripley, if you're putting her in a match in Australia, she's going to get cheered. She's going to be the fan favorite. So you're obviously going to get that natural love for Rhea, that natural heat for Nia Jax. But dude, again, like, I don't see Rhea Ripley dropping this belt. I mean, I could be wrong, but dude, could you imagine Nia Jax winning in Australia this Saturday?
Well, I mean, if you're going to build another star, because Rhea's pretty much made. And I'll say this is probably controversial. There are a lot of other wrestling fans, but I don't care. Nia Jax coming back this second run, I think she's done really good. Like, I think her stuffs look better. Her promos, although not great, have been better. They're giving her like a better aura where she's not as goofy at times. I think Nia Jax has actually really elevated herself. So this match is kind of must see with her heel work. And what I think is going to happen is I think Rhea's winning for sure. I think they're going towards Rhea, and who we'll talk about coming out of that women's chamber, which is pretty obvious, I think. But I think it'll be a good match. I think Nia's probably going to dominate a lot of it because you got to keep building her. Even if you're going to have her lose, she can still get over and look like a real butt kicker here. I think Rhea wins, maybe holds on, typical babyface, fire up late, get a couple big moves, win. But I think Nia is going to look super strong so you can keep her in the title hunt without this killing her. I think Rhea wins, she retains, but Nia looks great and doesn't lose any steam at all.
I personally am not a fan of Nia Jax, so I'll hold and I'll withhold my personal opinions on seeing Nia Jax on my television again. It just cannot see a scenario, and they've even teased it too with like Nia Jax could win the title and go on to WrestleMania to face potentially somebody she's had a past history with. But dude, I think they have kept a certain someone away from Rhea Ripley, and that match is coming to a head at WrestleMania. I think they hinted at the press conference a few weeks ago, right before The Rock slapped the taste out of Cody's mouth and, offended all the Cody crybabies like Josh Burton. No offense, man. But
it's all right. Hey, Rocky sucks, right? Rocky sucks.
Dude, you just don't appreciate the greatness of The Rock, and he was going to give you the greatest WrestleMania main event of all time, and then you had to like go on your little keyboard.
Yeah, that whole 2 minute that whole 2 minute match he was going to be able to work before getting blown up and hurt. Yeah.
Whatever. But I think Rhea Ripley is going to wrestle at WrestleMania the winner, who I think of the women's chamber match, Becky Lynch. The match this week is Becky Lynch, Bianca Belair. That's another option. Liv Morgan. Liv was taken out of action by Rhea Ripley. Raquel Rodriguez wins the last chance battle royal. Tiffany Stratton, who just got a call up from NXT, and then Naomi, who returned last month at the Royal Rumble. But dude, when I'm like looking at all these, again, they've kept Becky Lynch away from Rhea Ripley for a year now. I think that's your match at WrestleMania. Do you see that happening? Do you see any other candidate potentially winning?
No, that's who I was referring to when I kind of laid it up for the teaser. It's I shouldn't say so confidently, but I think it's going to be Becky. It makes sense. Becky's a good talker. Rhea's kind of, as you mentioned, the pseudo baby face now, and regardless how heelish she tries to be, Becky's the big baby face. So that is like the marquee match. It was good to see Raquel back. I was never really a huge fan of her, although she is a Packers fan, so shout out to that. But here's some of the medical stuff she's been dealing with. It's good to see her back. It gives them another powerful, big-time woman kind of to throw in the fold for the division. Bianca would make a lot, like if they wouldn't have started teasing the Becky thing for years, we've always wanted to see Bianca and Rhea, and that would be my option number 2 because they've done the promotion here lately for the video game, both of them breaking, history making with the co-women on covers. It would be a tremendous match. We've wanted to see that match dating back to when they both first got called up. I know they wrestle in NXT, but it's different stage, different women even now. So I think Bianca would be the only other option that would make sense that I'd get really excited about. But I'm with you. I think it's going to be Becky against Rhea. That makes a lot of sense. The promos they'll cut, the story they'll tell. It'll be a really dang good match at Mania. I am surprised. I thought instead of Raquel, I thought for sure that last spot would have been occupied by Jade Cargill. that would have been a good spot for her, but I trust them that they have something huge for her down the road. I mean, you talk about the star power in this too. Tiffany Stratton's she's going to be a massive star, like a massive star with that, her work, her gimmick, her talking ability. Naomi comes back as a huge baby face. Liv Morgan is improving every single year. She's got a good look. She talks well. We talked about Raquel, got the size, can work. This is a really good chamber match for the women, but long story short, Becky wins. Option number 2 would be Bianca, the only two I can see challenging Rhea at this point.
So I didn't realize until you mentioned it, Bianca Belair versus Rhea Ripley's never happened on the main roster, particularly at WrestleMania. And they've been at the top of the card. I was going like 100% Becky Lynch, foregone conclusion. You just talked me into, I don't know how, you just talked me into like giving 10% stock into Bianca Belair.
Well, it makes sense though, right? Like, yeah, I mean, it makes sense. If you go into like the dream match has been talked about for a couple of years now, after Bianca got her belt and then Rhea started really coming up through the ranks, and those two have always, like, fans have wanted to see them to clash, and now they're on the cover of a video game together, and they've played into that in the last month, and there's a lot that's going into it. So I think I would say Becky 60%, Bianca 40. I think it's a little closer than people think, but I do think it's still Becky at the end of the day.
And especially with WrestleMania 40, I've said they've always tried to go big for the landmarks, like 40, 35. 35 had Kofi Mania, 30 with Daniel Bryan, 25 you had Taker Michaels, 20 you had that triple threat of Triple H, Shawn Michaels, and the other guy.
Yeah, the other guy.
My wrestling diehards would figure that one out. But dude, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, of course, Jade Cargill, I think, needs to find her way onto WrestleMania somehow. We've talked about Jade Cargill versus Bianca Belair, but Jade Cargill could easily wrestle Becky Lynch, have a great match, and probably go over on Becky Lynch at WrestleMania. I feel like one of those pairings are going to work out, but we also have, last but not least, the men's Elimination Chamber match. Last but not least on the elimination card, we're actually going to be joined by Mike Mealy from the Mouth and Off with Mike Wrestling podcast. We'll get our Multiverse of Mikes here in a few minutes, talk about TNA and everything that's happening right now inside that locker room. But we have the men's Elimination Chamber match. We have Drew McIntyre, Randy Orton, Bobby Lashley, LA Knight, Kevin Owens, and United States champion Logan Paul in the men's chamber match. I think this is a less foregone conclusion of who wins. But before I get your opinion, is there anybody you think should have been this Elimination Chamber match that wasn't?
Listen, I'm not so downtrodden about, like, there's people, and I still wouldn't be surprised if they don't find their way on the show, like the hometown people. Like Bronson Reed would have made a lot of sense to be in this as a big heater. He could have took the fall. He's a local guy. I'm sure at some point, like, they'll throw a random match on the card, like, as a bonus, so he gets on there somehow. Like, I don't think they'll do that to him. But no, not really. I mean, I think everybody that's in the match is deserving. It's a big group of names that's not already like Cody or Rollins or Roman or somebody. I think it makes sense. I mean, I guess you could argue for maybe Jay, or if you wanted to throw the Intercontinental Champion Gunther on there or somebody. But no, I think it's a good chamber match as far as the name brand goes.
My big thing is, Logan Paul's in there. I'm sure that's for social media buzz. But I'd much rather see Logan Paul defend the United States title on the show in a separate match and have Sami Zayn in there. Like a year ago, Sami Zayn was challenging Roman Reigns for the undisputed WWE Universal Championship in his hometown of Montreal, and it was a hot crowd. You've had Sami Zayn the last few weeks try to be like, I need to find my way into WrestleMania. I'm a main eventer, and he's not even in the top 6 of your guys on the card. Like,
Well,
That it doesn't make sense.
here's why I'm not so concerned about it, because I think they're telling this story of like Sammy to try to get more, if it's possible, more sympathy for him. He's already a huge baby face where he keeps trying, keeps coming up short. So it's kind of that redemption arc with him. So when he finally starts winning again and he gets in the big spots, the fans are going to be behind him even more. So I'm okay with it. I understand your point too. I'm okay with it though.
It's a shame for me because I really wanted Sami Zayn in there. Gunther would have been great. I also am so shocked that Gunther and Jey Uso happened on Monday's Raw when they could have easily put it on Saturday with Gunther versus Jey Uso.
Do you know why? There's a reason behind it. Gunther is in the process of becoming an American citizen right now. And during that, it's like a 6 or 8 month period. He's not allowed to leave the United States. He can't leave. That's why he couldn't go to like Saudi at the end of last year. That's why he couldn't go overseas on like the holiday tours that they did over in Europe. He's still in his, like, it should be at the end of it from what I understand, but he's still in that like probationary period to try to become an American citizen, and he can't leave the country. So that's why they put that on Monday last night, I would assume.
Man, that's a bummer, but we did get to see hopefully the start of Jimmy Uso versus Jey Uso that will hopefully clash at WrestleMania. But again, we'll have one match before we get to WrestleMania in terms of premium live events. We have that men's elimination chamber of the competitors of Logan Paul, Kevin Owens, LA Knight, Bobby Lashley, Randy Orton, and Drew McIntyre. Who's your pick to win? Who's challenging Seth Rollins for the World Heavyweight title?
Look, I think it's pretty easy, especially after last night's Raw. Drew's going to win. Like, I don't think storyline-wise it would make sense for anybody else. Now, I would love to see him throw a curveball in LA Knight. Like, to me, that would be a lot of fun just because I'm such an LA Knight fan. But it's going to be Drew because the story's there. It makes way too much sense not to have it. Drew's winning the Elimination Chamber, or I would be highly shocked if anybody else does.
So I'm leaning towards Drew as well. If Drew does win, I'm almost certain that his contract is, good. He's with WWE long term because I don't see them putting Drew McIntyre in that spot if he hasn't committed long term. I'd hate for an idea of Drew McIntyre, having a world heavyweight title match at WrestleMania, then 2-3 months later he's gone from the company. That just doesn't make sense to me. So I'm expecting Drew to win if he's re-signed, but if not, I think LA Knight and Logan Paul are going to have their clash. Bobby Lashley still feuding with Karrion Kross in the Final Testament. Randy Orton might be a dark horse here. He could get number 16, I believe, at WrestleMania. Could tie Ric Flair, could tie John Cena, if I'm correct on that number. Randy Orton, I'm looking at the SmackDown roster, and it doesn't make sense for him to enter a feud with anybody over there. It would get him over to Raw, and I have full confidence in Orton winning the title and then carrying Raw for 2-3 months before you make another big star. But there's only one way to find out. It's this Saturday, whether you watch live at 5 a.m. Eastern, if you watch a little later on. Again, don't text me. Don't text Josh. But what you can do is you can go find Josh's stuff. Josh, where can they find you and everything college basketball?
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. We're over at Twitter/X, whatever you want to call it nowadays. Still Twitter to me, at ECB Podcast 10. You'll find us over there. We'll drop our top 25 weekly over there. We've got a lot of great stuff, live chats throughout games that you'll find. A lot of good insight. We drop podcasts over there. Speaking of podcasts, you can find us on the YouTube, Spotify, Apple, anywhere you download your podcasts at normally. Just search up Everything College Basketball. You can find us there. And we have the Facebook group that has over like 1,600 members. We have a lot of good, insightful stuff, a great community over there. Just go to Facebook, search up Everything College Basketball. You'll see the groups. Or you can go do the hard way, www.facebook.com/group/everything college basketball. You will find us there. Send us an invite. And if you're not an idiot, we'll accept you and welcome you with open arms. If you're an idiot, well, take that stuff and go over elsewhere because we only want knowledgeable, fun college basketball people. But I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. And if they're listening, drop the mic. Of course, you guys are somewhat knowledgeable, even though you might be a code crybaby on your little keyboard. But we gotta get Josh out of here. When we come back, we have Mike Mealy, familiar face on Tobacco Road Sports Radio, and Drop the Mic. We're going to talk about TNA. What's happening with Scott D'Amore? What's happening with Josh Alexander and his contract? Why is Anthem doing what they're doing right now when TNA was on the way up? I gotta get Mike in. But yeah, go follow Josh, and we'll be right back with Mike Mealy from Mouthing Off with Mike on the Drop the Mic Wrestling Podcast. Welcome back to the Drop the Mic Wrestling Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Davis, Tobacco Road Sports Radio and TobaccoRoadSportsRadio.com as part of your Wrestling Wednesday card. Thank you so much for Josh on that last segment. And as advertised, as promised, we had to bring in Mr. Mike from Mouthing Off with Mike. It's the multiverse of Mikes. Mike, you know how this goes. I say Mike a lot of times. In reality, I don't really like you having you on my show. I just like saying my own name, Mike. Okay, but so Mike, how are you doing?
Dude, I'm doing good. I basically am my own moving company right now, so it's been a very hectic day. I'll probably be in great shape for WrestleMania. So if they ever need a talent to throw around the ring or Revolution, but I'm ready to talk, dude. Let's get into it. The multiverse of Mikes on Drop the Mic.
The multiverse of Mikes. We will be on a trivia show. I believe that drops sometime this week. We'll be challenging another podcast, and we're going to bring the titles home. We're going to be your tag team champions of the podcast community.
When everything is said and done in this trivia tournament, which is hosted by Four Sides of the Ring podcast, and our opponent this week in round 2, wrestling in the middle. So we've got an uphill battle. They scored pretty well in the first round. So we are coming for the first ever trivia champions crown by Four Sides of the Ring. So
they can wrestle in the middle. They can stay in the mid card, and you and I are going to be the main event. We're the main event Mikes.
We're the main event Mikes. We're cooking now, ladies and gentlemen. The main event for Throat Multiverse of Mikes is finished. It's over. Delete that from Drop the Mic and Mouthing Off with Mike. We are now the main event Mikes. Ladies and gentlemen, I like it.
We're the main event Mikes. We're even making the change. If you're watching our YouTube channel, we'll make the change. We were the multiverse of Mikes. Now we're the main event Mikes. But Mike, as many mic drops as we can on Drop the Mic, we got something to talk about here in the closing minutes of the show. TNA was on a roll. It was thriving. You had them rebrand from Impact Wrestling to TNA Wrestling. Scott D'Amore was in charge of all of that. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, they had Hard to Kill. They had Nick Nemeth. And then you get this announcement that Scott D'Amore has been let go by Anthem, who owns TNA. And dude, the wrestling community was just shocked. And of course, with all the Vince McMahon stuff going on, we were like, okay, maybe it's like more than that. Nothing's come out of that sort. So at this age as well, I'm so sorry. But it sounds like it was a money dispute, or Anthem just wanted to go in a different direction. Honestly reminds me of when Jerry Jones fired Jimmy Johnson as the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys because Jerry wanted the credit and Jimmy was getting it all. Scott was getting credit for TNA thriving. Yeah. Mike, what was your reaction to Anthem actually firing their TNA president, Scott D'Amore?
Look, I'm not going to mince words here. I was absolutely shocked. Going on social media, going on Twitter, and seeing that Scott D'Amore and TNA have parted ways after the last latter half of 2023 was built by Scott D'Amore. TNA, we look at it and we're like, oh, 2024 TNA hype was at its all-time high. But without the end of 2023 to really gear it up and get up that roller coaster, and now we're on the drop of the roller coaster where it feels like we hit the peak again for poor TNA. And I feel like this happens every time to them. As soon as they gain momentum, they gain popularity, people are talking about them, something comes in, somebody, the powers that be comes in, they change things. For me, the worst part of this whole thing is that this guy has went out and he built a fantastic roster. He did his job. He went out there. He saved as much money as possible for the big wigs, in the suits, and he put together an incredible roster. And now we were going in a different direction. They want to go in one direction. He wants to go in a different direction. Why not just trust the guy that you've trusted up to this point? Am I right? Like, why not trust Scott to run this? He's been doing it so well since he took over. So I think this is stupid. I think this is foolish. And truthfully, I mean, it doesn't make sense. And then the worst part, you know what I'm going to say? The worst part about the whole thing is they tried to play it off to the wrestlers and the staff that it was a mutual thing. That was one of the articles I saw, which is even worse about the whole thing. So terrible decision by them. What do I know? I'm just a guy who talks into a mic about wrestling, but I was thoroughly backing the TNA, bringing back TNA. Their first pay-per-view was fire, right? Would you not say one of the best pay-per-views to start 2024, right?
Oh, I totally agree. And don't discount yourself, Mike, because you're talking into a mic about wrestling. You and I are passionate wrestling fans. You and I see the content and we see TNA thriving, and we're like, okay, this is great because WWE's there, AEW's there, TNA's on the rise, Japan's getting more momentum in the
Japan,
States.
they have a new president
GCW?
too. Right, GCW is heating up. Look at this. But also on the flip side, not to derail it, but 2024 has been a wild year, dude. Like Vince McMahon, Okada leaving New Japan, Scott D'Amore getting fired, and I'm sure I'm missing. Oh, Rossi Agawa with Stardom, that whole thing coming out. So like 2024 has been a whirlwind what's going on? Like there's so much moving happening.
Raw gets going to Netflix next year. The
Rock's on the board of directors now. Now he's in a program.
Now he's a heel. Now he's a heel.
Yeah, right. Hollywood Rock or corporate Rock. Dare I say, whatever. Dare I say, like this is kind of the merged version of corporate and Hollywood Rock that we're seeing. I don't think it's one or the other. I think it's the combined version of what you're seeing there. So, no, this is a wild year. I think I have a few choice words for Anthem. So if they ever catch this, man, catch me outside. How about that? All right.
Catch him outside. How about that? Dude, I am with you, man. Because, I mean, and to this day, it's just like, oh, they didn't want to go in the direction of Scott D'Amore. We're wrestling fans, okay? The talent, the wrestlers have backed Scott D'Amore in a letter to Anthem.
They loved him.
They loved him on social media. Like, it's Anthem, who are not wrestling guys, trying to put their hands in and meddle with a wrestling product, and it doesn't work. It never has worked. No. It didn't work with WCW. That is where the line is being drawn. And speaking of talent, like they started posting hourglasses on Twitter and X, whatever you want to call it now. One of them being Josh Alexander. Dude, you gotta refer to it as X at some point.
It's Twitter, and it's always Twitter. I will die as a Twitter sayer.
Well, I'm more of a Facebook guy myself, but
we're Facebook humor over here. Continue. I'm sorry,
dude. I like my Facebook mainly because of my face, but you can get that on any social media platform. I'll have the social media scrolling on the bottom for you guys if you're watching on Tobacco Road's YouTube channel. But dude, one of these guys who posted the hourglass was Josh Alexander, who's arguably the face of the company. He's a TNA kid. The first show, weekly show under the TNA banner, it was Josh Alexander versus Will Ospreay. Like that, he is the face of TNA, and he posts this hourglass. And then, of course, TNA posts on their social media that not Josh Alexander didn't sign an extension with TNA. Anthem just chose to utilize the injury option because of the time he missed with his shoulder to force him to stay longer under contract. And usually companies don't like promote that. Like, hey, we've re-signed this talent. We didn't re-sign. He didn't come to an agreement. As a matter of fact, you're forcing him to stay longer, which other companies do, WWE and AEW. But they tried to make good publicity of it. But instead, you just pissed off your John Cena of TNA.
Oh yeah.
You make
it look way worse. Now now he ain't signing. I wouldn't sign. I mean, you knew, obviously if the contract says any injury time missed, you have to fulfill. Sure. If that's the case in point, then fine. But to do it like that after everybody and all this news and all of the wrestlers are in favor of Scott, and then they fired Scott all those weeks ago, and we're still talking, we're still on the discussion, and now it heats up even more this week, which I don't understand the thought process. I mean, I don't think I ever will. What I will say is whatever kind of 90-day no compete or whatever kind of stipulation Scott has in his contract, I'm sure he has a countdown set. And as soon as that thing hits 0, we will see Scott in a capacity in professional wrestling, because Scott is a genius. Look, realistically, maybe not a genius, it's a strong word, but look at what he did for that company. Look at what he did for the talent. He made them all certified, stars that any wrestling company wants to sign them right now. Even look at Jordan Grace. Never a couple years ago, I would have never thought Jordan Grace would be in the Royal Rumble. They had a great relationship. That's another thing that gets put into kind of the limbo. Scott probably was the one that built that relationship with WWE. That's out the window again now. So there goes any possibility of a TNA, WWE, or NXT Worlds Collide type of deal. So terrible decision. Let's see what happens. Let's see if the programming significantly changes. Is it true Tommy Dreamer is now the head of creative? Now, is that, I saw various different reports. One said he is, one said he's not. I didn't see anything other than that since then. So could you shed some light, or no? Are you not familiar yet?
So the last thing I saw, and I'm obviously not in the locker room, I don't know, but Tommy Dreamer's part of a creative team.
Okay.
But he is not head of the creative. It's the other guy that Anthem appointed, which, dude, you mentioned Scott D'Amore and what he could do. Dude, I would not put past him somewhere like, hey, he'll go WWE, hey, he'll go to AEW. And yes, he'd be valuable at both those places. But let me throw an idea out. Scott D'Amore had financial backing to try to buy TNA once he saw the writing on the wall and that he was going to get fired. He could use that financial backing and use his support from the TNA locker room to actually build his own company. I wouldn't be surprised. And honestly, I'd kind of like it.
I saw that floated. I saw somebody, if it was you, I don't know who it was, but I saw somebody else or heard somebody else mention that, like, wouldn't be shocked to see him even start his own wrestling promotion. So if that's the case, yeah, I'd probably tune in and check it out. I mean, I was tuning in, and I'm someone who, I watched TNA way more than I watched WWE as a kid. And I stopped watching for a very long time. And then over the last couple of years, I wanted to tune in, and I casually view here and there. But I would say at the last 6 months, the half of 2023, I was watching a lot of TNA, at least those pay-per-views. So I was really getting back into it. I was really trying to support the up-and-comers of wrestling, Josh Alexander being one, Jordan Grace. You got Moose over there. Love Moose. So I hope they can bounce back on this. Obviously, I'm sure the wrestlers are, upset about it, but I hope that they can still put on good shows and keep showing out, at least for their own brands. And I guess we'll see where it goes from there.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that TNA had so much momentum. We were talking about on the show a month and a half ago of like Nick Nemeth coming in, and now a lot of that's overshadowed because of Scott D'Amore. Let it be known, hashtag on Drop the Mic, Hashtag we want Scott.
Oh, absolutely.
That's what
Hashtag
we want.
Scott.
We want Scott. It's tough. It's hard. I'm sure we're going to be following what happens with TNA for time to come. But I've been tuning in TNA while Scott D'Amour's been there. I've also been tuning in to the Mouthing Off with Mike Wrestling podcast. He has his own YouTube channel. You have his social media handles there at MOWM_podcast. Yeah, we're out of time on Drop the Mic. I want to say stay tuned to our social media channels, particularly Tobacco Road Sports Radio's YouTube channel and Tobacco Road Sports Radio's social media channels for some big news coming in soon. I want to tell you guys that. Thank you guys. That's your treat for staying on Drop the Mic this week. Thanks so much to Mike from Mouth Off with Mike. Thanks so much to Josh from Everything College Basketball for hopping in today. Go follow them on their social media. Subscribe to the Tobacco Road Sports Radio's YouTube channel for more Drop the Mic episodes this year, more content for myself. Follow us on our socials, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. But most of all, thank you guys so much for spending your Wednesday with us on Drop the Mic. We have to get out of here, but whatever you do, don't drop the mic. And we will see you all next week with not only an Elimination Chamber recap, but also an AEW Revolution preview next week on Drop the Mic.